Good morning, everybody. I'm Philippe Dumas, the Secretary General of EJEC. I welcome you to this webinar. We still have a lot of people connecting, so we'll start in 2 to 3 minutes. Thank you. Good morning again. I hope you are all fine in this strange situation with a pandemic we have all over Europe, but also all over the world, because I say the world because we have also some participants from, I see, Australia, New Zealand, South America. So I hope you are fine. Thank you for joining this webinar. We are organized in the framework of our project Georisk, which aims at establishing schemes in as many countries as possible for de-risking geothermal project. As you could have seen, we organize it today because this week, but also in some following weeks in October, the European Union organized the weeks of regions and cities. We know that geothermal, we are renewable energy sources, but we have also these features to be really local, to have really a local dimension to provide heating, cooling, and electricity for security of supply. And it's why for us, developing geothermal is a key partner, our cities and regions. It's why we have the idea to organize this event today in this European Week of Regions and Cities in Europe. Today, I have a great pleasure to have excellent speakers to present some results of Georisk, but also some perspective with some case studies. So following my short presentation about Georisk, I will give the floor to Marie Lecomte from Geneva State and the Energy Department, and she will report about how Geneva is developing some district heating systems with geothermal, and how local planning is a key element for the investment in renewable sources such as geothermal. Following that, we'll give the floor to Sophia Lettenbichler from the Recurrent Power Association, so the Association of District Heating, and she will report to us what are the current barriers for developing a district heating project. I will then give the floor to Thomas Garabetian, EJEC Senior Policy Officer and the EJEC Manager for the project Georisk, and he will report what are the policy solutions to facilitate the development of geothermal district heating and cooling. And last but not least, I will then give the floor to Mikko Santic, Managing Director of GPCIP, but also President of EJEC. And as a specialist in district heating with geothermal, he will give us some elements about business models to finance a geothermal project. We will conclude with a Q&A session. Our session today is about 1 hour and a half. For the Q&A, you have different possibilities. If you have an immediate urgent question, you can raise your hand, and we can give you the floor for one short question orally, not during the presentation, but after the end of each presentation. Secondly, you have a question possibility, and you can raise your question, and we will try to answer as much as you can, or during the webinar, or as a follow-up. And what I say as a follow-up, many of you have attended previous webinars of Georisk, and you can confirm that if we don't answer during the webinar, we always send you an email after that with a full explanation for answering your question. Last but not least, there's also the chat option. With that short presentation of agenda, I will now present you briefly what is about Georisk. Georisk, as I said, is not only to establish a risk insurance scheme for geothermal, is mainly for allowing the development of geothermal. Geothermal, here we speak mainly with deep geothermal because it's here where the risk component is more important. It's electricity, but in this map I show you district heating. From a previous project results, we know that 25% of the European population lives in areas suitable for geothermal district heating systems. We don't say that tomorrow we will cover all this population, but the potential is really important. What we need now is to have the enabling factors for reaching this potential. One of them is de-risking project. I don't go to the detail of this presentation, but it's more the heart of our project is that when we start a geothermal district heating project, and especially municipalities, you need a lot of investment and the risk at the start is at the maximum. So you need to have the tools to allow your investment to have a progress in your project and to decrease the risk. Our project is with 15 partners. We cover essentially Belgium, France, Turkey, Hungary, Poland, Greece, Switzerland. But as you see, our objective is to replicate these schemes all over the world. The schemes for de-risking and mitigation schemes exist already in some countries, in France, in Switzerland, in Netherlands, and in other ones. So we know already what are the lessons learned. Our objective is to cover the maximum countries in Europe, but also in Africa, South America. Recently, we have seen the interest of Canada, and I mentioned at the start of my presentation, we have also some representatives from Australia, and last week we engaged a discussion with Australia to also disseminate our first results about Georisk. So if you're interested, feel free to liaise with us and we'll try to do our best to support you. To support you in different dimensions and risk assessment. So what we have done for the first time, I think it was done, it's a risk register. You can see what are the different risks associated with the development of a geothermal project and what are the tools to mitigate this risk. The tool is called Georisk Report. It's an online tool mainly for developers, but it can also support service companies and technicians at local level or regional level from authorities. And this tool is available. It's not the final version of the tool, so it's not only to consult, but it's also if you have some comments, feel free to report to us your comments, and we'll try to improve the tool. You can see here some screenshot of this presentation, but the best for you is to visit the website and to try this tool. After having assessed the risk, we try to see what are the tools to mitigate the risk. So we have done a first full review of the existing schemes, and we have also designed some innovative tools. We speak about financial tools, not technical tools, but financial tools for de-risking project. On top of that, we have also set the framework conditions to establish a new insurance schemes, the legal basis, what are the procedures, what are the key stakeholders in public authorities to allow the development of a scheme. And the current work, as you can see, the point 4, is to have an help desk to support authorities designing public or public-private de-risking schemes to make this happen and established. The help desk is also ongoing development. So if you have any comments and suggestions for such an help desk, feel free to send your proposal to us. What we are working on currently is to establish a liaison with the key decision makers to have that happen in 3 countries. Hungary, Poland, Greece is our target countries, is where we see a big potential for geothermal and especially geothermal district heating in the near future, and such a scheme for de-risking project will be really helpful. So we focus currently on these 3 countries. We look at also the situation in France, Germany, Switzerland, and Turkey, because the scheme is already existing and how it can be further developed with a more private participation in a public scheme. So this is also ongoing work. Interesting for you, because when we speak about public or public-private, we have to see what is the budget needed, the public contribution. And for that, we are developing a 10 years operation simulation of a financial model. It's some version, draft version as working document exists. We hope by the end of the year to provide you this simulation. As I say, we will try to replicate in terms of Poland, Hungary, and Greece these schemes in Europe. We focus on Denmark, Netherlands, Belgium, Croatia, Serbia, and Slovenia, but also outside. I mentioned Chile, Kenya, Canada, and Mexico. And recently, we engaged also with Australia. We will develop some tools for that, the capacity building. We can organize some webinars. As you know, it's hard for women to develop physical meetings or training sessions, but we'll try to do some webinars, and we will have some support document on capacity building materials, notably to list project, to define projects that could be eligible to a de-risking scheme. Of course, you can find a lot of information on the website. We have some report, brochure, and we organize regular webinar, as the webinar today, to report our project. I end with that my presentation about Georisk. As I say, feel free to look at our project results, to give a comment to them, and I hope you will enjoy the webinar today, reporting more in details some results. With that, I'm happy to give the floor now to Marie Lecomte. And the floor is yours for a presentation.
Good morning.
We can see your screen, but if you can put on full diaporama.
Yes. Here we go.
Basculer. Yeah, here we go. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. So thank you for inviting me over to this EGEC webinar. My name is Marie Lecomte, and I work for the Geneva Energy Department, Geneva Canton in Switzerland. More specifically, I work for the program Geothermal, of which you can see the logo at the bottom of the slide, which aims at implementing geothermal projects here locally in Geneva. First of all, in Switzerland, we already have some subsidy schemes that are applicable to geothermal. These schemes aim at developing the use of renewable energies, and in the case of geothermal, it targets geothermal energy for electricity, geothermal energy for heating needs, and that's at the federal level. At the canton level, so Geneva, for instance, we have schemes that are dedicated to building energy use, so building standards, renovation, and what sort of energy is also provided to the buildings, and as such, district heating networks are also being supported. About a year ago in Geneva, after a request from the local parliament, a number of targets have been set to attain carbon neutral society by 2050. The first step is to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 60% by 2030. And the targets more specifically relevant for geothermals are the ones aiming at reducing our fossil fuel consumption for heating, and also the massive increase in the part of renewable energies in our district heating and cooling networks. So within those two targets, geothermal has obviously a key role to play. Today in Geneva, like in many other places around Europe, over half of our energy consumption is for heating needs, for buildings, for industries, for hot water. And of this massive part, over 3/4 is provided by fossil fuel. So there is a room for improvement, at least. So we want to decrease that amount, and we want to replace a good part of it by renewable energies. And for that, geothermal is a key player. We have also the luck to work hand in hand in Geneva with our local publicly held utility company, which is called SIG, Service Industriel Genevois, and having that industrial partner which can be in charge of implementing the solution is a massive plus for implementing geothermal. As I said, geothermal has been identified as a key player for changing the energy mix and our climate change goals in Geneva. The potential identified is to cover over 20% of the heating needs of the canton by 2030. This is based on several studies that are going on developing district heating networks and the mix of energy that's available locally. Like we all know, geothermal is a key player because it's a local, renewable and low CO2 emission energy. And also something that's important to note for Geneva is that the canton has a monopolistic position on its underground resources. So it's also our role as a public authority and our responsibility to ensure that these resources are managed in a sustainable and efficient way. So that's kind of introducing the need for a clear legal framework, both from the energy department aspect, but also for the environment and water management department aspect. For that, we have been working on adapting our legal framework. And once the legal framework have been set, it's then the time for the administration to develop some planning policies and tools and database, obviously, as well, to collect information, play a role to monitor, do a surveillance and adjust the energy transition policies we have ongoing. Talking about energy policies, this is a document that's just about to be released. And as you can see, geothermal, once again, is identified as a key player. We have some set targets for the amount of energy from geothermal that we want to implement by 2030. So that's 150 gigawatt hour. We also have plans to start some pilots in terms of ATS projects. It's not something that's existing yet in Geneva, but that's underground energy storage is also an axe that we want to work on. And a large aspect of the energy planning policies is about district energy network development. As such, I'm just showing you here the forecasted development of district heating and cooling networks over the canton. So in red and blue, you have the existing networks, and orange and pale blue is what we aim at developing about over the next 15 years. So pretty ambitious plans, given that Geneva is a very densely populated area and with lots of existing buildings. So it's not straightforward, but that's definitively a target that's been set by the canton. The other policy that's extremely important when we talk about geothermal, because it's underground resources, it's all the underground resources planning policies. So there, the canton wants to provide not only a surveillance role, but also support and management of its underground resources. When we talk resources underground, it's not only geothermal, it's drinking water, for instance, and multiple usage coordination is fundamental when we talk about all these resources. And the coordination with the energy policies is also key. This is how, if you want, they are working together. So we have this underground resources planning that's ongoing with these specific policies, looking in priority to manage drinking water and the geothermal resources. And then we have on the surface the energy planning policies, where to the opposite of the underground, it's an open market situation. And at the moment, the main questions we have is how we are going to manage the interface between the monopolistic situation of the underground resources and the geothermal resources, and how it is then being used on the surface with the district heating developments, local buildings, and so on and so forth. Finally, last but not least, in Geneva, we have a program that's dedicated for the development and the support of geothermal projects. This program exists for over 6 years now, and I joined it over the last 2 years. And right from the beginning, it's been looking at a holistic approach to develop geothermal projects. What I mean by that is that it's not a project-based approach where you would do prospection and then exploring and then develop and provide the energy. No, there we've been looking at the whole Geneva area and how to provide a robust, consistent framework to allow the development of geothermal. So that's looking at not only operations like exploring, drilling wells and developing projects. It's also looking at all the communication aspects. It's important that the population knows what's going on and that we have a license to operate and the public approval to continue developing geothermal projects. We look into supporting the development of a consistent legal framework. That's what I was talking to you earlier on. A geothermal basin is not limited to the Geneva area. We are surrounded by France. We also have neighbors, the Vaud canton, and looking at the larger scale of the geothermal basin is really important when we want to manage this kind of resource in a sustainable way. So the regional coordination is fundamental. We also look at developing local content knowledge, improving the ability of local professionals to work on geothermal projects. Data management is also a massive aspect of it. And the latest tool that we have been looking at providing and that's currently being developed is a tool to help support the coordination of heating demand, what the resource is able to provide, who are the actors, and when are the projects happening. And basically, this tool is aiming at taking the project developers through 2 stages to, first of all, understand if they can do geothermal or not, if it is possible right where the project is happening. And if yes, once it's identified that their project needs coordination, planning, organization with projects around it, and maybe a transition solution for the projects before geothermal is available, then the geothermal program looks after the project, provides support, provides helps, and hopefully make these projects happen. So that was it for my presentation. Just a quick conclusion and way forward with what we have ongoing. So like I said, in Switzerland, we have some existing subsidy schemes. And in Geneva, the local authorities and the public health utility supplier is working hand in hand to provide the tools and the support adapted to our local context. For that, the political objectives and the political message is really important because that's really where the administration can then start working in developing a strong, supportive and robust legal framework that secures public investors, private investors, and all the players that want to then come and work for geothermal projects. Like I said, geothermal has been identified as a key contribution to our energy transition. It needs a strong coordination between environmental and energy departments. And for that, this holistic approach program that we have is key at helping all these actors working together, and also at providing practical tools to hands-on make things happen. The next steps that we are looking at with our Geothermal program is all the costing and pricing conditions that are going to be offered to support the development of these geothermal projects. We are thinking about different business models. Do we want to go in a risk assurance mode, infrastructure buyback, pay some studies that would then be sold to project developers, and so on and so forth. So these are the questions that we are looking into at the moment. And that's it. That finishes my presentation. Thank you for your attention. If you have any questions about our program, this is the website. And otherwise, I'm available for questions.
Thank you very much, Marie, for this excellent presentation. Yeah, I've learned a lot of project development in Switzerland. I don't know if you have an immediate question, but maybe it will pop up later. And I say we plan also to have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So I will now give the floor to Sophia Lettenbichler from Recurrent Power to present us what are the current barriers for project development in district heating.
Yes, thank you so much. I think you should already see my...
I confirm.
Great. All right. So as you already said, I work for Euroheat and Power. That's the European District Heating and Cooling Association. So I am by no means at all a geothermal expert. But what I would like to do today is to put a bit into perspective how geothermal energy will contribute to decarbonizing district heating in the next decades to come. All right, so I am not only working for Euroheat and Power, but more specifically the DHC Plus technology platform, which deals basically with everything related to research and innovation in district heating and cooling. We have really a broad area of what we cover. We do some education and training with the summer school, for example. We have a knowledge hub where we gather a lot of information. We do advocacy and communication, but also research and business network support. And as you will see in my next slide, we also have a number of EU projects that are currently running. I don't want, of course, to explain them all to you, but what is a common theme, I would say, is the decarbonization of heating networks. So, for example, if you look at Reward Heat that you find in the middle of the screen, this is a big project that has basically started last year and really deals with a lot of different renewable sources and how to integrate them in district heating and cooling networks. Having said that, it really means that district heating and cooling networks currently in Europe still are facing, the issue of decarbonization, and public support, especially European funding, is still really important here. And the same goes, I would say, also for geothermal. Okay, so let's look at the facts first. We currently have around 13% of Europe's heat demand met by district heating systems. But according to some models, up to 50% of Europe's heat demand could be met by district heating and cooling if the right incentives and also the EU regulatory framework is there. Now, if you also look at the energy and the renewables, this is a number that looks at all of the energy, so it's not only heating and cooling. You see that a lot of Scandinavian and Northern European countries are already actually overachieving on their renewable energy target. A lot of these countries, as you will also see in the next slide, have high shares of renewable heating and cooling shares as well. So let's, for example, look at Sweden with 65%, but also Latvia, Finland, Estonia, and so on. All of these countries that are high up on this list have a really high fraction of district heating and cooling networks. And the reason for that is that district heating and cooling enables basically to integrate a lot of different renewable sources. Okay, I would also like to highlight research that has been done in the last couple of years via the Heat Roadmap Europe project. It's the most comprehensive study of heating and cooling demand, but also supply in Europe. I think they did it for almost all of the countries. You will see on the map here that some of them are a bit grayed out. It means that they have not been covered, but in the end, Heat Roadmap Europe covers most of the heating and cooling demand and supply in Europe. Now, I had a look at the Pan-European Thermal Atlas, which is part of this project, a really nice visualization tool, and I invite everyone to have a look at it and play with it a little bit. I think Philip already showed a similar slide before, and I basically took out here the likely geothermal, hydrothermal sources and areas, but also heat flow density that is bigger than 90 megawatt per square meter. So these are actually areas where we probably have some geothermal heat in Europe. And as you see, it covers a lot of European cities that are really big ones, for example, Berlin and Hamburg, but also Lyon and Paris. Having said that, let's look at the next slide, where I looked at other layers, namely more than 90 degrees geothermal energy at around 2000 meter depth, or more than 50 degrees temperature at around 1000 meter depth. And also here you see we have major geothermal potential in Europe. Now, I also want to say that this is actually based on a project that finished in 2015, and by now we already know that this is very conservative estimates, so probably the geothermal potential in Europe is much, much bigger. All right. Now let's look at the plan, what we have in front of us. We've all heard about the European Green Deal. We know that we have 32% renewable energy target by 2030. We also know that there is a sub-target for heating and cooling to basically increase the percentage by 1.3% on renewables over the period of 2021 to 2030. Yes, and we also just recently heard last week that there's a proposition of even increasing the CO2 reduction targets to 55% and also go for a renewables target of 40% by 2030. So the clear picture is that we are looking at more and more renewable integration and low carbon sources. The district heating and cooling supply, as you can see here, this is also a slide coming from the Heat Roadmap Europe project, forecasted for 2050, basically needs at least 44% of renewables directly feed into the system. We also have some heat pumps powered by electricity, or for example, waste heat recuperation that can lead to a fully decarbonized district heating and cooling sector. And out of these 44%, of course, geothermal is one of the really important sources. Now we also have national plans, and I just picked out some countries that basically highlight a little bit what's going on in the whole of Europe, that go, I would say, even beyond some of the EU targets that we already see. So, for example, the Netherlands has announced the gas-free program because they go out of the Groningen gas, and what is accompanied by this measure is basically a massive rollout of district heating and cooling networks, exploration of geothermal, but also other renewable sources. In Germany, the NECP basically says that the share of renewables and waste heat in district heating should be up to 30% by 2030. And we also have some numbers for France, namely the increase of renewables and heat by 40 to 60% compared to 2016, and a production target of between 218 and 247 terawatt hours in 2028. All right, so I think we already heard before that a favorable political environment, both on EU and national level, is really important, but we also have some, let's say, local front runners, and I think we already heard one just before me, but I just picked out also some examples that we see popping up all over Europe. So I would say cities and regions are becoming more and more progressive and also ambitious compared to what actually the national targets are. So, for example, we are seeing some Scandinavian cities that are actually going beyond any combustion source in cities that fire, for example, district heating and cooling networks. So they're really looking into phasing out biomass or waste incineration. So, for example, this is part of the Helsinki Energy Challenge, if you're interested in looking this. Then we also have other cities that we know of that are currently looking into major geothermal exploration. So just some examples is Vienna as one of the cities that we have also seen that has already mapped in to have some geothermal potential. And I can also say that we actually have some interest of cities that are now still a little bit hindered by financing and risk issues. I'm also happy to discuss this further later on. And what I also wanted to mention, and what I put basically next to here, is that we have some interesting projects popping up. So, for example, we have this very innovative project in the south of the Netherlands, in Heerlen, Mijnwater, where flooded mine galleries are basically used as a shallow geothermal source. We have Nanterre in France, but I also put a list of cities here that have potential for geothermal that has already been mapped a couple of years ago. And as you will see, the list is very long and really promising. All right, so having looked at all of this, is the age of geothermal coming? I would say yes, because compared to other renewable thermal sources, there are of course some problems. So, for example, the uncertainty. the mapping is, of course, only a mapping exercise, so you will still have to do some exploration, and it is also some uncertainty over time. For example, you never, the source in the well, for example, can change as well. You have a high risk and also high investment costs, which is, by the way, not only typical for geothermal, but in general district heating and cooling networks. But as I just said, the potential for major cities in Europe is really, really big, and geothermal is also able to offer a competitively priced heat. And as I also mentioned already, we know that at least 1/4 of the EU cities are actually in areas that can be reached with geothermal heat. Okay, so what is to be done? We still need public support, and I would say mostly to de-risk and also to finance capital-intensive exploration and implementation. And then I think the next decade will be really important for geothermal and decarbonizing district heating and cooling. Thank you very much. And I'm looking forward to the discussion afterwards.
Thank you very much, Sophia, for this presentation. And indeed, it's interesting to see the development of district heating. So now I will give the floor to Thomas Garabetian to see a bit what are, after having looked at some barriers, what are the policy solutions for facilitating the development of geothermal district heating and cooling. So Thomas, the floor is yours.
So thank you, Philippe. I hope you can hear me and see my screen.
Confirm?
Yes, I'm just trying to. Yeah, you should be able to see now, and I can switch the slide. Okay, so basically what I'm going to present you is a little bit in the continuation of the two very good first presentations, because so to come back a little bit to Sophia's presentation, indeed some of the main barriers to geothermal, especially heating and cooling project development, is the business model, as you typically need to secure the demand for heating and cooling when you are a geothermal project developers. You do not want to have your geothermal heat projects standing and not being used. You need to therefore to have some infrastructure available, and that's where the plans from Geneva and Sophia's presentation about the role of district heating is quite important. Then you need to mitigate the geothermal resource risk, which is one of the focus of the Georisk projects to address this issue. And finally, you have the issue also of what we could call regulatory risk, where complex licensing and authorization procedures, sometimes a bit lengthy with no clarity on deadlines, might hamper project development. Now, to first address the regulatory risk, at the European level, there have been some very positive policy changes that have been introduced, notably with the recast Renewable Energy Directive adopted in 2018, which typically prevents retroactive changes in support schemes, so which gives more certainty again to developers, and which aims at streamlining the authorization and permit granting process, notably looking at setting a deadline for the response to applications. Now, another very important solution to enable geothermal heating and cooling projects, and that has been especially touched upon by in the first presentation, is local energy planning, of which facilitates investment. So the local planning of energy infrastructure allows to bridge the gap between the energy suppliers and consumers, because with this planning, you can plan your investment in the geothermal plant and at the same time plan the investment in the distribution network, etc. You also guarantee that you would have some demand secure, notably from the local authority, and it gives stronger signals to developers to actually undertake investments. What we are seeing more generally, and this was highlighted especially in the analysis of the geothermal energy market done by EJEC, is that local authorities really have a key role in first securing the demand for geothermal heating and cooling projects, but also driving projects. This is quite important, as typically in the case of new networks in many countries, so new geothermal district heating and cooling projects must be competitive with typically gas, or for instance, well, let's say typically gas, because households cannot be forced to connect to a new district heating network in many European countries. To come back also on this on this topic of local energy planning, you can come back to the presentation that were given notably from the Hot Maps projects in Strasbourg Eurométropole during a previous Georisk workshop in December 2019. Now, the topic of the Georisk project is especially to address the geothermal resource risk. So this is especially an issue because when you invest in a geothermal project, you might not be certain that you would have the necessary geothermal resource for the project to be economically viable. And that's a problem because, as you can see here, you need to spend quite a lot of your investments before the risk actually decreases. So you can see this red arrow that goes down after only the drilling of the first well, and this represents quite an important amount of investment. So to bridge this issue, many things could be done. So first, we need to consider that drilling is about 50 to 70% of the cost of a geothermal energy project, and geothermal projects are typically very capital intensive. So you need most of the cost of a project is capital cost. You have very low operational costs, and you could have private de-risking as for any type of project, that's insurance basically, but this requires that the risk be low enough, and so typically this requires progress in exploration, experience or market maturity, and comparability. And what the Georisk project has found and is looking to implement is how public scheme can bridge this gap between the geothermal risk and the need for insurance all the way to private insurance. Sorry, I went a bit too far. So now first, there's the challenge of the physical reduction of the risk. This can be done through exploration. Typically, you could have some publicly funded geothermal resource exploration campaign, investments in research and innovation for more precise exploration material, and wider and better quality of information of geological data available to developers. At the European Union level, you have programs such as the 10E, Trans-European Network for Energy, and the Connecting Europe facility that could support this this initiative to facilitate the development of new geothermal projects by mitigating the risk in increasing the available information. Then what you can do is to go to risk mitigation with de-risking schemes on a financial level. So that's one of the findings of the element that the Georisk project is looking to address, is to have the right scheme for financial de-risking according to market maturity. So what has been found is that first, when the market is not quite mature, so when it's at a low level of commercial readiness, grants are the most relevant form of de-risking, and that's typically the case today in the Polish geothermal market, where the Polish government is providing grants to facilitate investments in new geothermal district heating projects. once the market is a bit more established, you have more knowledge about your geothermal resources, you have an industry that starts to be able to implement projects and that has experience. Convertible grants can be a solution. And that's typically the type of model that at the European level, the innovation fund could be providing. So a grant that if it fails, there might be you might have to pay them back. So yes. Then when the geothermal market becomes a bit more mature, you would move towards repayable grants, finally to loan guarantees, and then you would move towards public insurance schemes, and finally towards public-private insurance schemes or private risk mitigation schemes. So public insurance schemes would be schemes where by paying a premium, geothermal project developers would benefit from an insurance from only the public funding, and typically progressively you could move towards public-private partnerships with private actors providing at least part of the insurance and progressively taking over the whole insurance market. Now, support schemes overall are quite important to address the issue of the geothermal resource risk. They are a crucial tool for compensating for market failure and allow technologies to progress towards market maturity and therefore reduce costs. Typically, electricity and especially heat market as well are very much dominated by structural market failures. For instance, the result of decades upon decades of public subsidies and investments toward the establishment of heating market structure, today typically dominated by fossil gas in most of Europe. And now we are looking to correct this issue, and that's where support schemes are are a good instrument to correct this imbalance. Then innovative financing mechanisms can be adapted to the specificities of geothermal technologies, which with a low amount of public investment, they can actually allow them to become more competitive or to bridge some of the issues that market failure that via market failure prevent the competitiveness of geothermal technologies. And then geothermal risk insurance is a relevant public support measure for overcoming the geological risk. And first, having this type of measure as a public allows the emergence of the geothermal market, and once this market is consolidated, it can become increasingly privately funded. More generally, also one of the points that is a takeaway of the Georisk project is that when looking at support schemes, it's quite important to have quite a holistic approach, and for instance to go beyond only looking at the levelized cost of energy, and really include all the system costs, externalities, and as well the additional services that can be provided by a given energy source and technology. So at a rapid conclusion to this presentation, so local planning provides feasibility to developers, resource mapping provides key information to policymakers, investors, and developers. So to policymakers, notably for the local energy planning. Having the right business models is very important to successful developments, and Miklas is going to come back to this point in the following presentation. And then we have this challenge that existing market structure and the dominant position of some technologies or energy sources must be accounting for in the design of support schemes, and as well when assessing the competitiveness of a technology. And finally, support schemes allow the emergence of a robust geothermal heating and cooling industry, notably through the right de-risking schemes at the right level of market maturity to allow for competitiveness. So thank you for your attention, and happy to answer some question in the Q&A following. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas, for this presentation about solutions and notably some financial possibilities to do this project. When we discuss finance, we need also to tackle the issue of business model. So I think it's the perfect link now to give the floor to Miklos Antic, Managing Director of GPCIP, and as I was mentioning also, President of EGEC. So Miklos, the floor is yours to give us a bit more details on the business model and notably the successful development in Paris area. You are muted. We cannot hear you yet.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Good morning all, for all you are listening, and I'm very happy to give this talk at this seminar today on financing. I don't know whether you can see my PowerPoint. Now you should see it, I guess.
It's coming.
It's coming, okay.
Here it is.
Oh, yeah, I am, as Philippe introduced me earlier today, that I'm a specialist in district heating. This is just partially true. What we are doing, we are geothermal engineers dealing with everything which is underground. So we are providing the necessary heating, mining, I mean, it's not politically correct, infrastructure to produce geothermal energy out of the ground. So from 5 meters to 5,000 meters, anything which can be produced by geothermal energy, this is our cup of tea. So in so doing, we are of course extensively involved in many geothermal projects. I have the great privilege to work on the most emblematic geothermal site in the Paris area, which is the greatest geothermal system, geothermal district heating system to date around Paris, which has been developed since the early 70s, and it's still under development with a good pipeline of projects, and we see a rebirth of, let's say, geothermal in the area. Well, today I'm not broadcasting this presentation from Paris, but from my own hometown, from Oradea, which is the western Romania, located at the border with Hungary, which is meant to be a true geothermal city because it has a tremendous resources, and hope that the next decade will prove that a city of 250,000 inhabitants will be able to be supplied by geothermal. Well, as Philippe said, I am also the president of EGEC, and I'm in office since 1 year, and I'm benefiting the great support of the secretariat, who is doing an excellent job in setting up all these webinars and activities. Well, I'm not going to give a technical talk. However, this is a bit my vocation. I'm going to make a mix between technical and financial talk. So, well, geothermal general characteristics. If we look back of what has been said, and is always said, it's an energy which is well suited for base load with a capacity factor of over 95%, but it also can accommodate variable load. So geothermal can modulate itself in supplying the demand, the heat demand. Energy prices. Well, I've been working in so many places, not only around Paris, but all around the world, and also in Europe. They are very, very limited. I mean, very site specific, because every reservoir is different, every district heating is different. So the price, the energy price and the heating selling price is not equal from one side to another. Being a local energy, of course, it's close to the user, it's close to the population, and it's limited for export. So unless we are developing geothermal energy at the border with Switzerland, which is an example, we can do cross-border energy supply of geothermal energy. Well, of course, the economics, higher the temperature is, better the resource quality is. That means flow rate, temperatures, and transmissivities. They are strongly influencing the economics. Well, in some cases, and there are quite a few in the world, that when the high quality resource is available, geothermal can directly compete on price over other energy resources without incentive or subsidies. We have seen earlier today that subsidy and the risking and risk mitigation, these are key factors in promoting geothermal energy. Well, this is a map among the many maps you have seen today, and which has been done within the framework of GeoDH project by EGEC and a consortium of other participants, which has mapped the geothermal potential in Europe and all the candidate district heating sites which may be eligible more or less to geothermal district heating. So when we come back to the slide that Philippe showed us, that 25% of the population can be heated and cooled by geothermal energy, this is really true, and this is not yet achieved. Well, obviously, below our feet is a resource, and the resource we need to manage it in a sustainable way. And around this resource, we do have the technology to produce this resource, which we develop it by research and development, innovation, consolidation, best practices, in order to make it to have it at the top. Then, of course, we have the industrial contributors who are developing, the operators, the suppliers, the stakeholders, and last but not least, training and education for the geothermal, because we have many people who are converting now themselves from geothermal from oil industry to geothermal, and they need to change a bit of, they have the basic culture, but they need to adapt to geothermal. So this is training is also important. And as you can see beyond me, the geothermal decade is kicking off. While my previous speaker said that it's going to be the geothermal age, I would not say it will be perhaps the geothermal millennium. If we are much more ambitious, then we will need people, very well trained people from geoscience and also to the application to develop this resource. And of course, we have the market, and the market is dominated by, of course, what the resource can give us, what is the demand on the market, how are we going to develop the resource, and then we have the environmental and regulatory aspects, because in many countries until now in Eastern Europe, we did develop geothermal resources by just producing the geothermal water and dumping it to the river, creating in some instances environmental impact, which was in some instances also positive, because it created an ecosystem around the hot water dumped in the surface. But in some instances was negative, because as geothermal brine can contain minerals with the negatively influenced environment. Risk mitigation, which is combined, this is the finance, and these are all the elements of the financial scheme, which you have to support, the feasibility, which will give the first element, the supporting mechanisms, the incentives we can have in the project, the risk mitigation schemes, which have been extensively developed by Thomas, and then we need also to have our own equity in the project in order to go around this, which is the central part, is the resource, which we have to develop it sustainably. Sustainability means that we have to develop in such a way to leave it also in a good shape to our next generation. Well, what are the financial characteristics of geothermal resource? There is a high capex and the low opex compared to many other resources, for example, hydro. Drilling, this has been said already today, it can be up to 50 or even 70% of the total project cost. And exploration and delineation drilling, this when we are going to a new resource, we have to proceed a bit as the oil and gas people say do to characterize the resource, and then we have a risk, and then the whole project at exploration stage may not be feasible as planned. So we may have to spend some money and not find the right resource to develop it. And then requires a substantial investment in drilling before commercial financial closure. And then exploration cost, this is what we see, new areas are independent of future project size. So we need to go through the whole sequence of geothermal production, geothermal development, in order to be able to develop the resource. And most of the projects require at least 5 to 8 years planning and investment before any revenue is generated. So this is a bit the long run, and as we would say, the geothermal decade. What if we start planning the project today? It will come into operation within 5 years, or let's say 4 the best. Well, which is the fundamental problem in geothermal financial characteristics? The risk of the geothermal projects resembles to the oil and gas projects. We are all looking to a resource which is underground. But compared to a barrel of oil, the barrel of hot water worth only 50 cents, not 45, which is today, or 70, which was before the COVID. And even before last year, we were having prices even up over $100. So the returns on geothermal projects, they are a bit lower than from the similar types of project profiles. But a geothermal project, in terms of returns, as it addresses mainly heat production, it resembles to a utility project. So it's a utility project which supplies heat to people or to industry or to other domains or agriculture, and all these utility companies, and this is the practice we live in, and banks are adverse to risk. Whatever deals with risk, they are not very happy with it. Well, perversely, this is what happened in the past. Now it's no longer the case, or we don't know what is going to happen because the world is changing and everything is rethinking. The rising in oil prices increase the upfront cost of geothermal projects because of the competition for human resources, drilling rigs, and materials. And what we have seen until recently, that drilling costs have increased relatively to general inflation. Well, de-risking. De-risking, we are in the project Georisk, but de-risking comes and more in the picture, even on resources which are exploited as the Paris area since 40 years now. Well, we are going to new horizons, we are going to new reservoirs. Imagine that the reservoir, that the geothermal resource is a big story building with many floors and flats, and in many stories we may have another resource which we know or we don't know. Of course, we need to have a good quality geoscientific data before getting on planning the geothermal project. And for this, it is very useful that government agencies carry out this work and make it accessible. Well, I can give you an example from the country I'm talking now, that in the past there has been a tremendous exploration work in geothermal, and a wonderful collection of data which has been done over many years. And in Turkey, the same is the government who took on the exploration, and in France, the same in early days. Well, exploration drilling, which is most of the capex which we are spending it's good. It is also recommended that government agencies took over this. However, it's no longer the case in Western Europe. So private investors go on this exploration drilling. Well, again, in the countries I mentioned before, exploration drilling has been carried out extensively, and lots of data has been collected and available. Well, we have countries which are traditional oil and gas countries like the Netherlands, who have a wealth of data collected from oil and gas exploration, which are available freely on the internet after a certain time when they were collected. So these are also key geoscientific data which contribute to the de-risking of geothermal projects. Should the government go and do exploration drilling, the problem of transferring the wells, which are more or less successful, and environmentally and the liability towards the environment, it could raise an issue. Well, this is a diagram which shows the building blocks of an ESCO, energy service contract, geothermal district heating business model, which is actually publicly driven, and not only publicly but driven by these green blocks you can see in it. And this has been published in a report of the GODH project, so you can find it online and read it through. Well, you can see that, of course, the first building block is the customer. Then we have the value proposition, the geothermal district heating. Well, of course, the objective is to have energy savings and renewable energy supply, which we are talking about all the time. And then on the third place, we do have the infrastructure and the companies who are promoting the customer. How do we do the relationship and we promote this energy supply? Then we need to generate revenue, of course, because we need to repay our investment. And how can we cover our investment? We do have also politically guaranteed support. We do have bills which we collect, and of course we do have green certificates. For doing so, for putting up all this, we need resources like money. We need, of course, beyond money, we need a good geothermal reservoir. And not only we need expertise, which has been developed in producing this resource, and a district heating expertise in how to optimize district heating. Most of the tendency today is to move ahead. There are new generation district heating systems, which are so-called smart grids, which could supply heating and cooling on demand. So more and more renewable energy has to change shape, moving from multi-energy or multi-type energy system grids. Of course, we need to have planning, and then we need to have all the partners in the projects, the district heating utility, the geoscientific experts, the companies which are drilling, and the service companies which are generically named as drilling companies, the financial institutions, the public authority. This is very important, and of course all the companies which could advise us in energy saving and structure. Of course, the cost structure depends also on the permitting and also on what are the requirements and needs. Well, this is pretty theoretically, but it includes all the elements we need to make a geothermal project successful. Well, here is a much more simple diagram where you could see the typical financial systems and streams, private and taxable operating companies. Of course, you need investment to have production heat and sales, out of which you need to pay the royalties, the taxes, which are quite high. In some instances, you have to pay your credit loans, you have to pay dividends to the shareholders, operation and maintenance costs, should never forget them, and provision right. And then, of course, the sales contract and concessions, you have to pay them. From where you get the money, you may have fundraising, you may have equity, shareholders, bank loans, and of course, you can return from your heat sales and cash flows, you generate money to your self-financing and develop new projects. Well, I don't know whether this is quite visible. How do we get from the resource, which is on the top here, which in most of the country in Europe is not a privately owned resource, but it's a state property, to the district heating network? So, of course, we need, from the state, we need to have a delegation to a competent authority. So we need to have an agency, like in France, we have the natural resource, we have the energy agency, and of course the environmental agency. In other countries, we have the mining authority. So it is called a competent authority, which will give a mining agreement, a mining permit, to a title holder, which will hold a concession. And from the concession, he may do an exploratory work, and then have an operator. And we could, after the exploratory work, we could get to the resource assessment. Having assessed the resource, we can have a concession owner for the production. We have a distribution. We need to sell the heat somewhere. And then we need an operator to handle all this, to produce the heat, to sell the heat to the end users. Of course, this operator will have to pay back royalties to the competent authority because the revenue generated by heat production has to be remunerated also to the public money, as the state owns the resource. Well, this is a, let's say, artist view of the, no, maybe it's generically named Paris Basin Geothermal District Heating Scheme, but this applies to any geothermal district heating schemes. On our schemes, what we have two wells which are drilled on the same platform, deviated one to each other, directionally drilled, most of them. And then we have a production well, which is pump assisted. Then we have an injection well, which we return the heat. We do have a heat exchanger, a backup boiler in case that the geothermal system is down. And of course, we have the geothermal loop here, and we have the grid to supply the heat to the buildings. Well, this is nothing very complicated with that, but you have to make a good adequacy between the resource and the users you may have at the surface. But in so doing, the capex for the geothermal project, I'm going to give you an example now. It is the mining capex, which is needed to bring the resource to the surface, which is composed by the well drilling, the primary geothermal loop, the geothermal heat exchanger. And I listed you two figures here, the minimum and the maximum. So the capex for a classic geothermal project in our area, it can be between 10 million and 10.7 million euros. You need the surface grid, as I was illustrated before. You have a secondary grid. You need a heat plant. You need the grid, the piping, the substation. All this can vary, depend on the size of the grid, between 11.9 to 14.6 million. So you need a total capex for your project, which moves from 21.9 to 25.3 million euros. We have just completed a geothermal project which is addressing the heating of 20,000 equivalent dwellings in the north of Paris area with two doublets. So from one place they were drilled two doublets and the same row, 4 wellheads, and then 20,000 inhabitants will be. Of course, the capex for this type of operation, and we are addressing a very large, very long grid, more than 15 kilometers. They are much higher than which is listed here. OPEX is operating costs are divided the same in mining and surface, and of course they are composed by the same items. You need to run your plant by using electricity. You need chemicals for the water treatment and the geothermal wells in order to prevent corrosion and scaling eventually. You need monitoring, you need some maintenance on your wellheads and on your equipment. And of course, you need to provision on heavy duty maintenance. That means from time to time, you need to come back to the well and repair it, clean it and fix it. And also you need to check the integrity of the well. The integrity issue of the well is key because this secures the environmental security of the geothermal production. And of course, you have other costs. For the surface, of course, you need energy, power and chemicals, you need the monitoring and maintenance, and then, of course, you need the provision for the depreciation of the grid. And then, if in fact, you get it back. Well, summing up all this, we have brought here the worst case, the best case, and the medium case, and we ended up, according to the subsidy we receive from various cases, with the break-even costs. We can see that for the worst case, when we need to invest 25 million euros and we need 1.6 million euros of OPEX, and we do not have any subsidies, we reach at a break-even of, say, cost at 81 euros a megawatt, our thermal. Just to call you back that in France, the average heat sales cost is 57 euros. DTC with the tax out. So you need to subtract 20% in order to get the tax. So this is double the price. So nobody will buy your energy for such a high price, because on the top of it you need to add, if your grid doesn't cover more than 50% of the need by geothermal, you need to add 20%. If you cover more than 50%, your VAT will be 5.5%. So the energy price of the customer at the customer side will be very high. So we can see that for the West case, even for 35 euro, 35% of subsidy, you will end up with a reasonable price, and then you can get it out to the grid and sell it. For a medium case, this is what we are living. Of course, energy prices in the Paris area are much higher than elsewhere, and we are moving between this and this sales price, break-even prices for geothermal. But this is break-even, and we didn't generate any profit out of this. Well, this was an example. I would like to invite you to go on the website and read the GeoDH report, and within this is the chapter 4.2 with respect to business models on geothermal DH system. So this is a very instructive document for everybody, very well written, a very good contribution. And then I just want to conclude here, thanking very much for your attention and telling you that geothermal energy, and repeating it, it's a renewable, sustainable, proven, achievable, and realistic energy. And beyond the ambition of the decade or the age or the millennium, I think it is the resource which will heat us next. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Miklos, for this really interesting detailed presentation about business model and also reporting the cost. It's really important always to report the cost. With that, I would like to open the floor for the Q&A session. I see that one question pop up. Is it possible to have a PowerPoint? Yes, of course, the PowerPoint will be available on the project website. If you have a question, the best is also to raise your hand and we can open your mic and you can raise your question orally. No, we don't have a question for a moment. So maybe I will start with some questions to the panelists. And Marie, you just pop up. So maybe a question for you, Marie.
Yes.
What are the next steps of the development of the geothermal system in the canton of Geneva?
Well, I guess we have several actions going on at the same time, as I try to explain. From an operational standpoint, our next big step is a 3D seismic acquisition campaign that's going to cover most of the canton territory. That's what's happening from an operational standpoint. As you know, that is not just a small exercise. It involves lots of people. It involves new ways of managing for the administration as well, because in Geneva we know nothing about geophysics or drilling wells. This is all new for the administration and the population and everyone locally. So this single operation is keeping us busy quite a lot. And at the same time as this operation, we are also launching a wide public communication campaign for raising attention to geothermal for the public, for the local population. So when the acquisition campaign starts, we will also be providing information. We will have ads in the news, ads in the cinemas, ads on the streets. We will be holding conference and communication with the news as well, and taking questions and so on and so forth. So we also have a big step forward to increase awareness towards geothermal. I guess that's the two large things happening next. Then from an institutional standpoint, we have regulations that are being modified, that are currently in the final tuning from the administration standpoint, and these change in regulations are going to be submitted to the local parliament. That's also something that is going to be key towards how we continue developing geothermal in Geneva, because if the local parliament doesn't agree, or if the local people don't understand, they can always launch a referendum. This is how our democracy works here in Switzerland. The direct democracy is very powerful. people. The people have a right to speak and be listened to, and they have the power to stop or question the parliament as well. So all that work, which is mainly driven by the administration, I guess, is also ongoing. It's a very crucial point for us, and it will drive how the future of the program is going as well.
Okay, I have also a direct question to you from Mr. Thomas Newell. A question for Mary. What is the time frame for putting the framework in place, and when can a private sector energy developer approach you?
Is that a question for Geneva as well?
Yeah, for you and Geneva, yeah.
Okay. So the modification of the legal framework should take about a year, we think, or to 18 months, if things go according to plan. Now, in terms of how the underground resources is being explored and is being appraised, this is because it's a monopolistic situation with the canton owning the underground resources. It's actually within the framework of the geothermal program that the operations for the exploration and appraisal is being delegated to SIG. So that's, in my presentation, I explained it very quickly, I guess. It's our local utility provider. It's a publicly held company. And I guess for that standpoint, the situation of Geneva is a bit special because we are working over the whole area with that very special actor, I guess, and that very special partner, which works with us also on all the other aspects of the energy transition. So I guess for an investor, it's going to be mainly for the development of district heating and solutions to then use the resources that are going to be made available. And this is still a regulation that is ongoing. There is some for what we are going to call the how would you say that, like the main district heating, that are going to be then structuring how the other district heating networks are being developed. So these main ones, most likely they're going to be a delegation again to our publicly held utility company, because there is that politic message and that goal at the canton scale to go for the energy transition. And for that, there is most likely going to be the preference to work with our publicly held company. And the backflip of that is that in terms of investment and returns and price of the energy, there is also going to be a specific business model developed to adjust for that situation. Then for all that's related to non-major district networks, the market is remaining open, and it's going to be about private investors working with the state that's going to have the resources made available. The state will keep their hands on appraisal, on understanding how the resource looks like. And again, because the state is responsible to manage these resources in conjunction with drinking water, for instance. And then private investors will be invited to work with the state to make the most of what is available in terms of our geothermal resources. The timing of that, well, it's happening now. It's just that for the time being, the resources is very much unknown. In Geneva and in the rest of Switzerland, we don't have an oil and gas industry. We don't have a mining or extractive industry history. So we know not much about our underground. So all this is going on at the same time as trying to make the most of what we already know is available. And for that, private investors must be happy to take risk and also work hand in hand with the state, with the administration, to develop those projects. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, it answers perfectly the question. Thank you very much, Mary. Now we have some questions for you, Miklos, so I will raise all of them at the same time. First, Miklos, is about what is the lifetime of a geothermal project, and what could be the LCOE if we calculate over 50 years payback. So first question is lifetime and payback time. A second question is how would you approach the project in Romania in the context of financing opportunities for the next years? Would you start with local government, research, or international experience in the field?
Okay. Well,
and the third question, Miklos, sorry.
Yeah, third question, okay.
How are the best practice of retrofitting district heating?
Best practice. Retrofitting, okay. Yeah. Well, first question, I can answer you by coming back a bit of what has been recorded experience in developing geothermal project in the Paris area, because by 2000 we have reached geothermal projects which have been operating since 30 years. And then the clients on the same site ask us, what do we do? Because the normal lifetime of the geothermal wells, that means the mining infrastructure, is planned between 25 and 30 years. So this is difficult to overcome. It was difficult to overcome at that time, given the hostility of the geothermal water with respect to corrosion and scaling. So we have seen that after 30 years of exploitation, the geothermal wells have had to be relined, and relining of these geothermal wells led to the reduction of the energy production which we could obtain from the same wells. Well, we have studied that extensively, and then we have developed a sustainable development scheme because now we are benefiting of the new technologies. We can build anti-corrosion wells. The problems of scaling and corrosion is solved. We do have downhole chemical injection line. So we can convert the existing doublet into a triplet for another 25 years. So we can produce geothermal energy for another 25 years from the same site. Of course, the two old wells will be down after another 25 years because they were relined. Of course, the steel will be off after 25 years, and then we will need to drill a new injection well. So you can drill a new injection well in another position in the reservoir, and then you can prolong for another 25 years the lifetime of the well, provided that the first well you drilled for the triplet is a modern well, is an anti-corrosion well. So you can operate basically a geothermal reservoir on the same site for 100 years, 75, 100 years. So this is but you will need to, of course, spend money periodically on new wells, as you do in any other business in mining, oil and gas. What we have done also, our experience, we have had one of our most emblematic projects we have done was a world premiere in doing sub-horizontal wells in geothermal in the Paris area. By doing so, we have replaced 4 wells, that means 2 doublets, which were producing since 34 years, with a new doublet sub-horizontal wells, which is exceeding the capacity of 2 doublets. So the 2 doublets before were capable of producing 380 cubic meters per hour, and now the new doublet it's capable of producing 450. So this is technology which we borrowed from the oil and gas industry, adapted it to the geothermal because we are 1 diameter higher, and then it was quite successful, and then we can operate again. The geothermal site will continue operating for another 30 years. Well, this is a bit, so basic lifetime, when you plan a geothermal doublet, you should plan it for at least 30 years. And then from the same site, you can develop it in a sustainable way for another 75, 100 years, as long as you want. But you need to implement sustainable reservoir management strategies. This is the key of heat production. Okay, discounted payback time. Discounted payback time today of the interest rates are quite low, and then if you give some value to your equity, let's say 2%, between 2 to 4%, you can obtain a discounted payback time between 4 to 6 years. So then you are off. Then the next question: how would we develop geothermal in Romania? Well, honestly, I can tell you, I'm a fierce, let's say, defender of geothermal development in Romania. I have spent 10 years of my career in promoting geothermal in my hometown where I am now. I still didn't give up. And how would you do it? It is a rather complicated question. I would say that we should do it as we have a lot of geothermal resources, and we have most of the western part of Romania full with geothermal resources, and where with extensive geological knowledge. I have done an initiative, but COVID has stopped us, to federate all the communities which are eligible to geothermal development, whatever for district heating, whatever for spas, for greenhouse heating, all the application in western part of Romania, federate the communities and make a joint project proposal in order to create a joint stream of business. And then, of course, for that, we will need to do a lobby. For that, the existing association should be a bit reactivated in the sense that should do the right geothermal lobby for the country, and then I think it can work, because there are still remaining a lot of talented people and good expertise from oil and gas in Romania who could be easily converted to geothermal, and then I think, I'm convinced that this can work, but we need a cooperative approach. And this is, I think, culturally, it's missing here. But it's missing not only here, it's missing in many countries of the world. But the only way of taking off the ground geothermal is not doing singular projects, is doing a pipeline of projects which will generate revenue. So I'm still thinking of that. I had great expectation this May from the planned meeting, but COVID has been come through. And then I think next time when we can meet the people and we can federate them, and this, I think EGEC could do an initiative of federating communities. And there was also an European project of the mayors who were addressing geothermal. So I think we should speak to the community leaders and then develop geothermal. Well, I'm going to be too long in my answers. Well, best practice for retrofitting. Well, the key is that depends on the resource. This has happened in France because initial district heating have been built for high temperature, for 90 degrees, and then when the first wells were drilled, they were not so hot. They were 70, 80 degrees. And then even in the north, now we have tapped a resource which is 60 degrees. How do we do retrofit? But it's by let's say changing the district heating system in the buildings in order to adapt them to low temperature. So you will have higher flow rate and lower temperature. And on the second, the secret is also isolation. And then in Western Europe and all over, I think all European countries have the ambition now to spend a lot of money in efficient energy buildings. And when we are going to have isolation of the buildings and energy efficient buildings, I mean, we can use rather low temperature geothermal resources to heat these buildings. I think I answered the 4 questions which were asked for me.
Yes, thank you very much, Miklos. I try also to sum up a bit your answer in the chat so people can also look at that. I think we have maybe one last question. If not, we will end the webinar because it's already 12:30. I just look at the latest question. There's a lot of questions. I say we will answer some of them also via email. Oh yeah, maybe this one, but resource quality. I think it's maybe Marie and Miklos to answer them. How can we measure resource quality? Is there a standard method?
This is part of the resource assessment. That means resource quality is given by the reservoir properties, which are by the transmissivity, porosity, and then reservoir resource temperature, and then flow rate.
Yeah, I think it was indeed a question from somebody, maybe not from the sector. With that, I think I look at the question, the ones indeed are a bit technical and need maybe a longer answer, but the different generation of district heating, the fourth and the fifth generation. I know that Recurrent Power and DC Plus platform are notably developing some project on that. So maybe the other questions we will answer you via email because the time is running. I really enjoy this webinar, and I think with all the positive comments we have received, I think also all of you have received that. We try to indeed add some policy presentation, technical presentation, but also about financing and economics and business model. So maybe indeed I ask all presenters to open again your webcam, just to say thank you all presenters, thank you all participants. And with this activity of Georisk is not the end of our story. We still have a bit more than 1 year to continue to work on this project, to implement that, and indeed to offer support to local authorities for developing geothermal district heating, but in general, geothermal technologies. I really thank you all, and I wish you a nice day, and hope by the end of the project we'll be able to meet physically in an event. Let's be optimistic. Goodbye and see you soon.
Thank you and take care. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.